Welcome to another edition of the Hellion Rocks. We have an amazing guest today, the legendary Rudy Sarzo. Rudy, thank you for calling in today.
My pleasure, Hellion, my pleasure.
All right. Well, let's get started off the bat. I've had a few people wanted to give questions for you. So I'm going to ask those in when I get in there. And let's get started. So how did music enter your life?
Oh, I think that everybody is surrounded by music. I mean, music is the soundtrack of our lives. I mean, I can't really recall anybody that I've ever met that is not influenced by music, by either becoming a musician or being a fan of music. It's around us. It's even if you listen to the birds in the morning, they're making music.
Right.
The sound of the waves crashing on the beach, that's music. Music is everywhere. So
Beautiful.
of course, I think, we get influenced as children with lullabies, and then lullabies get a little bit more rocking, and then we start getting into rock and roll, So I can't recall a time in my life where music was not part of my life, So it's been there, and people make commentaries about certain musicians, saying that they were born to play. I think everybody's born to play, an instrument, whether we choose to or not. I mean, it's all part of our life. Sometimes becoming a musician, it's a calling. You can't help it but to play music, whether it's for a living or for just for the sheer pleasure of making music, But I think every human being is born to play.
Beautiful. I often feel that way, too. I feel music is primal to us. You find yourself tapping a beat, and like you said, you hear it in nature all the time. So I think music is an integral part to who we are, and I'm glad that people like you,
absolutely.
I'm glad people like you decide that you're going to pursue it. That gives us even more to enjoy.
Well, thanks. I mean, again, it was something I didn't have a plan B. It was like, well, if I'm making it in music or at least make a living out of it, I'll do something else. No, I mean, this was it. And
right.
I mean, I'm not saying it was the smartest thing to do, but it was that's what worked with me,
Awesome. Then this is the first of my fan questions. Somebody asked, why did you choose the bass, and do you play any other instruments?
Well, that's another good question. Yeah, I do play other instruments, but every great musician or say a player, they just concentrate on one thing. I mean, I play with some of the greatest guitar players, and that's what they play. For example, Steve Vai is a guitar player, Randy Rhoads guitar player, even though, at some point you wanted to also play classical guitar, but it's still a guitar. The only musician that I know is fantastic, a virtuoso at multi-instrument, it would be Tony McAlpine, who actually started out playing classical piano and made the transition to the guitar. But he plays the piano and the guitar just magnificently. So there's some exceptions, but I think every great musician, and not just in rock and roll. If you look at let's say Miles Davis, he was a monster at the trumpet. Jacko, even though he also played piano, his main instrument was the bass. So
right.
That's as far as an instrument goes. But I think all of these great musicians, what they have in common is that they are actually musicians. They're not necessarily just a player. They are actually musicians.
Beautiful. And then I have another fan question. They wanted to know, what kind of music did you grow up listening to? What music was going on in your household when you were in your formative years?
My formative years was basically Latin music because we didn't come to the United States until I was almost 11 years old. So to me, the formative years are, pre-teen years. When I came to the United States, then I was exposed to the blues and R&B and, of course, the British invasion, which the British invasion had a lot of blues and R&B. Initially, like the first Beatles records, there was a lot of Motown in there, and a lot of, Chuck Berry, And so with
Right.
the film, so yeah, even though we were influenced by the British invasion really embraced the R&B and the blues.
Awesome. And did you, this is for me, did you have any formal training or did you learn everything on yourself, on your own?
I studied a bit of music theory in school. Stuff that now I can actually look at it and apply it. But back then, it was very hard for me to find the connection between music theory and actually playing, blues or R&B oriented music. So I just basically did it by ear. Yeah, so it was a little bit hard to connect theory with actual rock and roll, but there's a lot of theory going on in rock and roll. Even if it's theory of breaking the rules, there's still, it applies. I think it's very important for any musician to learn the rules of music theory so you can actually understand where music is coming from. And then just like any great blues or rock and roll musician, just learn how to break them. But at least you know what you're doing.
Right, right. So at what point did the music infect you enough that you decided you wanted to make a career out of it?
Boy, I just wanted to make a living. I just wanted to actually make enough of a living so I could actually play music. I wasn't going after any career heights or, trying to sell gazillions of records or anything like that. I was just trying to lead a happy life playing music. That was all. And that was from the very, very beginning. I think pretty much after college when I started playing, or during college, early 70s, started playing clubs where we actually got paid. Not a whole lot, but you got paid enough that, you can make the rent and buy a car and, have some certain, luxury items like food, to pay for. Yeah.
So if, and this is another fan question, if not a musician, what do you think you would have chosen to do with your life?
Wow. Well, I did study mass communication in college, and that was my first major, and then I switched over to music in college. To me, music is just an art form. It's a language, it's an art form, not any different from being a writer or being a photographer, being a painter, being an actor, being a director. So I would have been in the motion picture or television industry. Actually behind the scenes. I wasn't really interested in being an actor. I was more interested in being a writer or a director. So I did study that in college. Yeah.
So you're an artist at heart.
Yeah, it's just another medium for telling a story, which is what we do with songs. There are stories,
Right.
they're little 5-minute stories, and a movie, of course, is more elaborate. But I have a lot of friends in the motion picture television industry here, especially in LA, and I always ask them, why do you think that we can actually hear a song 1,000 times in our lifetime and not get bored and just maybe watch a movie or an episode of a show maybe a couple of times and that's it? To me, music is such an open-ended, art form that it has a completely different meaning every time you listen to it. It's applicable to whatever's going on in your life at that moment. And if you watch something that has been, I don't know, the vision of the screenwriter or the director or even the actors, to portray the characters, that vision is so permanent. Once you watch the movie, it's very defined. This is it. This is this is the moral behind the story. This is it. Whereas music is a little bit more vague and it's left to interpretation. So I think, it's just like looking at a photo. What does the picture or the painting mean to you? You look at it, and each individual is going to have a whole different emotion attached to that certain image.
That's some great analogies there. So if you were to stop right now, right where you are right now, and think, what would you call the highlight of your career?
Oh, it's still a work in progress.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
Oh no, I love my career. I always look back to playing with Randy and Ozzy and Tommy Aldridge and being part of that band. Yeah, maybe it was because it was my first break in the industry. Maybe it was because I went from sleeping on the floor to being part of the wild ride. Or maybe it was because I was playing with some of the most significant people in my life, you know. I think it was a matter of all of the above, really all of the above, you know. And yeah, I would say that whole, you know, Blizzard of Us, Diary of the Madman period of my life, you know.
That's awesome. And I have seen you play with everybody that, you know, I've seen you play with Ozzy, I've seen you in Whitesnake, I've seen you, you know, all those times, and I've got to say that your showmanship is outstanding along with your playing. What influence did you have on taking your showmanship from?
Well, I actually saw live a lot of great performers and a few bad ones, or a few that were not really performers, that were just standing around and playing. You know, I had seen more exciting sound checks, you know, than a lot of some performances. But it was always the ones that went out of the way to entertain the crowd. You know, because I've been a fan longer than I've been a professional musician, and I got to tell you, I really appreciate it when somebody goes out of their way to actually perform, you know, the music, you know, to give you something more than just standing up there and singing or playing a song, you know. I have played with some of the greatest performers, you know. One that comes to mind immediately, you know, of course, you know, I played with Ozzy, I played with Randy, I played with, you know, Steve Vai, and, you know, some of the greatest performers, you know, Coverdale, even, you know, the band Quiet Riot, you know, as a whole. But Dio, Ronnie James Dio, you know, and I'm going to bring him up because he was one of those guys who actually wrote his lyrics to every song, and he would really personify the characters that he was singing about. You know, when I would look over at Ronnie and he was singing Man on the Silver Mountain, you know, he became the Man on the Silver Mountain. You know, when he was singing about Heaven and Hell, about the experience of, you know, going through hell, I believe that, you know, and he would take us on those journeys, you know, and to me that is the most significant thing that a performer can do live on stage or even on a record, to take you on that journey. You know, and that's why people gather, you know, they go through the hassle of going, you know, out to a live performance, wherever that might be, and just stand there and wait for that moment where this band is going to show up and perform, and it's all about that moment, you know. And that's what, you know, Roddy had that ability to really captivate an audience, you know. You know, and the same thing can be said about Ozzy. You know, he's still doing it. You know, after all these years, he did it with Black Sabbath, and then he did it on his own, and then he's back doing it again with Black Sabbath. You know, all of these compelling performers. You know, there's something about him. You know, and that's what I like. Those are my favorite bands to be in. You know, a band where everybody plays like that. And another one that I can actually, now that I'm playing with, you know, Jeff Tate's version of Queensryche, you know, to go on stage and perform with him Operation Mindcrime. You know, he is one of those guys who has that Dio quality, that he really personifies the characters that he sings about. You know, of course, it helps a lot when you have, like Jeff, he writes his lyrics. So those lyrics, it's not just, he's just not singing somebody else's emotions or philosophies. You know, that's him. What he sings, that's a part of him. You know, so of course, you know, he's going to get up there and deliver the message, which is what he does every night with every single song that he sings.
And that is an amazing show. I just recently caught you guys when I got to meet you finally after all these years. I got to meet you and your brother and Jeff at the show here in New Mexico, and it was a stellar performance, I've got to tell you. I was so excited that, you know, you were in the band, and then when I heard Robert was in the band, I was like, oh my God, both Sarzo brothers at the same time. This is going to be an amazing show. You know, and it turned out that it was awesome. That it was so wonderful to see you two on the stage together.
Yeah, that was the first Queensryche is the first band that Robert and I, we have the opportunity to actually tour on a national, level.
And how did that come to be? How did you get involved with Jeff Tate?
Oh, it's simple. It's just like every great situation that I'm involved in. I just got a phone call. He asked me if I
Nice.
want, and that basically that's what it comes down to,
One of the things that highlights. Go ahead.
Well, let me give you a little bit of background. I met Jeff when Queensryche was a tour as a support act for Quiet Riot back in 1983 in Quiet Riot during the mental health era. Quiet Riot's first headlining tour. We had been opening for Loverboy, and they decided not to take us out, for the second half of what we were supposed to be doing. So we were left with like 6 weeks off, and so our agency promptly put together a tour that included Queensryche with the Queen of the Rice EP that they had just released. Yeah, they weren't even signed to EMI yet. So I've been a fan of the band and Jeff, for all this time, and to have had the opportunity to be working with him, that was definitely something that was really unexpected. But what a pleasure, what a blessing to be doing this.
I was going to say that the standout moment in the show when I saw you guys was when Jeff Tate said, "I get to stand on stage with the legendary Rudy Sarzo." I thought that was so classy and so cool to hear that he.
The feeling is completely mutual. I mean, Jeff is the best singer of his generation. I mean, if you look at his catalog of songs he's written, the conceptual thematic albums that he's written, the idea of Operation Mindcrime and Empire and all those iconic Queensryche records, to come out, to lyrical content to come out of his mind, and the performances he's giving on those records and live on stage. I can easily say of that generation, he is the finest singer, absolutely, bar none.
Yeah, and he still sounds great. I mean, that album.
Oh, sure does.
When you guys did that show, that everything was sung to perfection and played to perfection. You guys did an outstanding job.
Yeah, because we really cared to the point that I
could tell that.
I got a replica, a newer model of the actual model of the bass that was used on the Operation Mindcrime, because our goal was to actually go up there and do the best celebration of that album, Operation Mindcrime, that we could actually do, And of course, of all the other songs, but we were really, really focusing on of doing the best performance that we could of that record.
That was awesome. Moving on now, somebody asked me to ask you what do you feel is the best and the worst part of world touring?
World touring, even domestically in the United States, I would say travel. Travel is getting a little bit more difficult, especially when you fly.
Right.
The best part of the audiences. The best part. I mean, the only reason for us to go out on tour is so we can bring the music to our fans. And that is always the most rewarding part of touring.
Very cool. If you could travel back in time and talk to your younger self, would you give any different advice to yourself?
Yeah, keep doing what I'm doing because it's going to turn out all right.
All right.
I'm going to be very, very happy.
Very cool. I recently read your book, Off the Rails. That experience in getting a book out.
What was the question again? Oh, by the way, thank you for reading the book.
Yeah, it was a great book. And how was it? What was the experience like putting together a book?
Writing a book is one of the loneliest experiences. But then again, it can be very satisfying because, you put yourself in a state that you are if you're going to write an autobiography, actually the book was never meant to be about me. It was meant to be, to answer the number one question I get asked, which is, what was it like to play with Randy Rhoads? So the purpose of the book was to tell everything that I had experienced with Randy in both in Ozzy and also in Quiet Riot, And it was very satisfying because I got to have Randy in my head, living in my head again. All those memories just came back. So it was actually like a walk through memory lane. And of course, knowing what was going to happen eventually, the hardest chapter to write was chapter 18, which is the last chapter where he is alive in the book.
Right.
And I thought that 19 was going to be, which is the chapter dealing with the crash. I thought it was going to be tough. But actually, once I got to start writing that chapter, everything just poured out, all the emotions, everything. I think it was one of the fastest chapters I wrote because I have been keeping all of that anxiety of living through the crash inside of me. So to actually be able to release it and put it on the page and kind of like let it go was incredibly rewarding because by the time that I wrote the end in the book, the biggest reward that I got from writing the book was definitely getting closure about everything that had happened. And it's not something that I intended once I started to write the book. I just wanted to tell the story, explain everything that happened, how it led to it and everything before that, and just answering that question of what was it like to play with Randy and Ozzy during that time, So and also I got to rediscover myself because you go through life and sometimes you're thinking about what's going on at the moment, and you start disconnecting yourself from your older self and how you got there to where you're at right now, and to actually be able to take personal account of my trajectory, musical journey. It was incredibly rewarding. I got to really rediscover myself again, And so, even before I sold one copy of the book, I already got my reward.
Nice. And that book, I when I picked it up, I kid you not, I got it on a weekend and I sat through and I think I read that book in like 36 hours.
Wow.
It was a good read.
Just between you and me and whoever's listening to this, it's funny because I do a lot of reading in the bathroom. So I actually wrote each chapter as, a trip to the bathroom. I didn't want it to be more than 10 pages. And the way that I wrote it was I segmented each chapter as each chapter was going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So anybody could actually jump in and pick it up in any chapter and still, get some idea of a sense of a beginning, a middle, of an end to that chapter. And then there was the complete arc to the story if you put all the chapters together, So, a lot of thought went into it, as far as, these segments. Each chapter deals with a certain subject,
Yeah, it's a well done book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And
I mean, it's not easy writing a book, especially if the book deals with facts.
Yeah.
Because if you're writing fiction, at some point, in order to keep it entertaining, because you should never punish the reader. You should always make it entertaining, and make it enjoyable to take that journey. I mean, if you're writing fiction, you can throw in whoppers and different story lines and plots, and you're just to keep it entertaining. But the challenge in itself was it had to be factual and entertaining at the same time. So, boy, that was hard.
Beautiful. Now, with all of your years of experience that you've had in the industry, if you could give a seminar to young musicians, what would be the best piece of advice you could give to somebody that's trying to break into the industry?
Well, to break into the industry, well, the whole thing about breaking into the industry is so hard because, the same models that we used to have before, 30 years ago when there was an actual industry, they really do not exist today. So, but the best advice I can give any musician, which is the same philosophy I had when I was young, was that I was playing because I love to play. There was no real strategy to me. My strategy was to keep playing and to make a living out of playing. Enough money so I could actually afford, to, have a place to live and a car and food and clothes and, things like that. It wasn't because I wanted to zillions of records, which eventually I did, or go on major worldwide arena or stadium tours, which I did. No, it was all about the purity. Keep the purity of your vision. Of course, have a strategy. It's so important now because, and I'm going to say this, the most important thing today is for any musician to really be educated about whatever form, shape, or form of the music industry that exists today. Because in the old days, we had management, we had producers, we had A&R guys, we had the machine that was the record industry that would take care of certain things on our behalf. As a matter of fact, we were sometimes kept in the dark about certain aspects of the music industry, so this machine could actually exist and have us rely on the machine, which actually nowadays that is not the case. Nowadays, a musician is expected to not only compose your own material, but actually record it yourself and produce it yourself, and then record companies will distribute it for you, which was not the case then. So yes, you need more of a strategy than we used to have 30 years ago, because a lot is in your lap right now, for the younger generation or the older generation that wants to continue being part of the music industry, So, but fortunately for the older guys, we have the experience of have been there and know what needs to be done as far as promoting a record, marketing an album, producing a record, picking the song, working with outside writers, all of the above. Yes, we've been through all of that. So we have those references, whereas the younger generation does not have those references. But nevertheless, you must either the mentorship of musicians or industry people that have been there and do have the experience. You must seek their mentorship, and hopefully somebody will come out and work with you in some capacity. And I think that is the best advice I can give you. Get a strategy. Make sure, because in the old days, my strategy was to come to LA, be in a band like the Randy Rhoads Quiet Riot, and play as many performances, live performances, make demos, and get the attention of the record industry, the local record industry, which right now doesn't really exist. That was our strategy, which is completely different to today. Today, musicians do not have to move to LA to expose themselves to the fans or the whatever record industry still exists out there. You have YouTube to do that. But then on the other hand, you're left to your own devices to compose the music, record it, produce it, of course, and then make a video. So, and so the fans can make, can watch the videos, get as many hits as possible, and the more hits you get, then you're going to raise the attention of whatever record company is out there that is willing to release the music that you already recorded.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's a whole different model today, but nevertheless, you must have a strategy in place.
Beautiful. Good advice. So now, you're playing with Queensryche. What can we look forward to else from Rudy Sarzo in the future?
Well, I still have other musical interests that I've been harboring for, before I got the call from Jeff last year. I've been playing with Animal USA. We're getting ready to start working on the third record. That's mostly in Japan. And this other band that I've been working with for the last, well, maybe year and a half, Tread, which is Mike Orlando from Adrenaline Mob and AJ Perro from Twisted Sister, and Tim Ripper Owens is going to be working with us on the tracks. Hopefully, he'll get to do the whole record. I mean, that's the plan right now. Also, I have this other project called Project Rock that we tour in a lot of the countries where the average major act does not get to tour, such as in, like Russia. And when I say Russia, yes, I play Russia there with bands like Dio and Whitesnake. But what we do with Project Rock, we really go deep into parts of the country where most of the bands, international bands, do not play. Russia, it's such they love American music. They love blues-based rock and roll there, So it is really our pleasure to bring, that type of music to them. Also we're going to be in Europe and South America and so on. Last year I did a solo tour of South America, mainly in Brazil and in Argentina, where I actually got to play the music that, from bands such as Ozzy and Quiet Riot and Dio and Whitesnake with national bands. For example, the band that I played with in Argentina was an Argentinian band called Alacran, which is one of the biggest heavy metal bands there. So it was such a pleasure to play with an all Latin band. The same thing in Brazil. I got to play with a Brazilian band. So so that adds a whole different dynamic to to everything that I do. It's just very diverse.
Awesome. We've been talking to Rudy Sarzo, the great Rudy Sarzo. He's given us some insight on what's going on in his head and how he came to be. Rudy, I thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say to your fans or people listening right now before we get away?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your support through all these years with all the bands that are playing it, and I hope that you guys keep coming back and we'll keep banging our heads together.
Beautiful. Rudy, thank you so much, and I hope to stay in contact with you, and I continue to support the projects you're doing. And, again, I just can't thank you enough for the interview.
Thank you for your support, Hellion. Thank you so much. God bless.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.